ProapUgandan, 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 ProapUgandan podcast. ProapUgandan, 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 ProapUgandan podcast.
Well, I was kind of inspired by you because I was like, oh yeah, last time you had that whole changey thing going on, and I knew so I was like, let me put something from UG on. And you look like you've got like a throne behind you.
Yeah. Listen, I've sorted this out. Okay, so I'm in the Netherlands at the moment, right?
Okay.
So this is like my first full day here. So I saw this nice little section. I thought, let me just curate it and make it interesting. So I'm gonna try to actually. This looks. No, that's not. Let me keep it like that. Yeah, it does look like you look like you're on a throne as well. It looks like, you know, you got the looks, the good looks. I like them. But yeah, so let me just do the quick intro, and then we'll get to talking properly.
All right.
Okay, so let me make sure everything's good. Okay, welcome to another episode of the ProapUgandan podcast with Kalungi, Seba, and the K. And today we've got another special guest. We actually know each other from social media, but I've been following her brother, a little brother, on Facebook, or we're friends on Facebook for a few years actually, which is interesting because he was a rapper once upon a time. But yeah, so the person I'm talking to today is Katasi.E Kironde. So help me, did I pronounce that right?
Close enough. So it's Katasi, and then I like to add an E. Just because I have an auntie with the same name, so we've got to differentiate ourselves.
Oh, wait, you got this as in Kata. How do you pronounce it?
No, I mean, I think Katasi is good. Like you did well. Like sometimes people pronounce it as if it has like 3 A's in it, like Katasi. But yeah, no, you did well.
Okay. All right. So, could you tell people what you do?
So by day, I work in project management within like the healthcare sector, and then by night or any opportunity I get, I do lots of my passion projects and my creative projects. So I run a platform called Elevate 256, which is really dedicated to amplifying Ugandans. And it was initially diaspora, but I've expanded that to sort of Ugandans everywhere, just because I think there's a connection between home and away, and I realized isolating ourselves was a little bit redundant. I like to write when I have opportunity to around food and culture. And yeah, so I guess you could call me event producer, writer, project manager / creative.
Brilliant. Okay, so I always ask my guests this very simple question. When was the first or last time you felt like a proper Ugandan?
Proper Ugandan, it's an interesting one. I think I felt like a proper Ugandan when I was dating this guy and he wasn't Ugandan. And I think for me, my Ugandanness is always amplified when I relate to people, if I feel like I'm feeling very Ugandan now because I'm surrounded by lots of West Africans. And in this particular instance, I think we're talking about like meeting friends and things like that. And I think as a Muganda, we have so many codes around that. It's not just something you just organize overnight when you're seeing somebody. It's all quite official. So he was like, oh yeah, sure. You can just come meet my mum. She's going to be on her allotment in the garden. You know, you can just rock up and meet her. And for me, it just felt so alien that it could be that casual, that I could go meet someone. It's like, in my mind, it reminds me of like my grandmother in Vilusuku, like meeting my grandma in her basuti that she works out in, or she does the gardening in, to meet someone else's mother, as opposed to like the officialness that comes with Baganda and sitting down and the various codes. So I think in that moment I realized I'm not sure how compatible we are because we just have very different outlooks on process.
So you felt too Ugandan for him?
Yeah. And I mean, he was, you know, unfair thing was he wasn't even Ugandan. So it seemed like an unfair judgment. But I think these things matter to me, and they matter to me as a Muganda.
Yeah, I think, you know what, you're right for it to matter to you, because like you were hoping you would do like Okuchala, like you'd get together with the whole different families, you bring the goats and the cows, you know, the matoke, the sugar, sukari, omunyo, everything.
It wasn't even, I didn't even need like a kuchara or anything to that level, but still just meeting someone in the garden was just like, what? Like, really too basic for me. Maybe it's because like Uganda much pomp, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm pompous. Maybe I'm a pompous Uganda. I don't know.
No, I don't think you were complex Muganda, because I feel the same way. It's the same reason why my mum has only ever met one of my partners ever. And that's because that casualness of like saying, oh yeah, let's go meet my mom, let's go whatever. Like I don't know, people, I feel like those of us in the West, we take for granted just how serious it is to bring your families together, to meet your partners, your parents, because back in the days, you only did that if you were getting married, from what I understand.
Exactly.
You know, so when people say, oh yeah, let me go, come meet my mom, she's in the garden over there. That's so casual, because the mom's like, wait, this is the dude or girl you're gonna be with. And I'm meeting them, and I haven't even put my makeup on, or I'm not wearing my gomesi, whatever, like, do you know what I mean? So yeah, no, I feel that. I don't think it makes you a complex Ugandan at all. It's just a no-brainer, really and truly.
Yeah, I'm glad you understand. Thank you.
100%. So you mentioned that you run a platform called Elevate 256, which I've been proud of being a part of. You recently posted, I think it was on that blog, or was it the Afro Bloggers one? Was that the same one?
I was doing a challenge as part of the Afro Bloggers, African Bloggers Winter ABC challenge. So that day it was around writing about you, like music that means something to you. So I thought, rather than making it about myself, let me reach out to some Ugandan musicians. Hence, so it was on my actual platform, elevate256.com.
Okay, dope. Yeah. So Elevate 256. I know you told us a little bit, you know, why you started it, but when did you start it? And yeah, when did you start it?
I would say officially about around last May, that's when I put my post out publicly. But it was always an idea that I had that I was just really too afraid to put out, because I didn't think anyone would be interested in learning about other Ugandans. So I'd written lots of stuff, you know, like posts I should have posted a long time ago, should have been what I started with. And then I just found the courage to, and I was like, let me just put this out there and see if there's any kind of response. So I think what was my first article? Can't remember. It might have been like 10 things I wish Uganda was known for apart from Idi Amin. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think the reason I started Elevate 256 was because I don't think we're very good at amplifying ourselves as Ugandans, and especially in the West, and the connotations that exist are just so narrow. You know, the reference point, I don't know if this is your experience, the reference point will be, oh, Uganda, Idi Amin. You know what I mean? Like nothing ever goes beyond that. So I felt like this is an opportunity to celebrate Ugandans doing really interesting things, or you know, amplify lesser voices. And I just think growing up, I didn't really ever see that. And then from there, last October, I did my first event because it felt like a natural progression to bring people together physically. Because I think that social media and the internet are a gateway to meeting in person.
Ah, man, great. I came across it when I was, I think, yes, I know exactly how I came across it. You were meant to have an event before Corona became a pagan and decided to ruin everyone's life.
Yes.
So that's how I came about Elevate 256. You were host. Tell us a little bit about this event that was cancelled because of Corona, and when hopefully it's going to come back.
So again, it was, I suppose it was like a showcase and like a fireside interview with Love Sega, who's I call him a polymath in the sense that he does a number of things. He's got a PhD in engineering. He was a founding member of Clean Bandits. He's a publisher in the sense that he writes music, so he's not just behind the mic. So essentially, it was just like a sit down, talk to him, find out his journey. Because I think another thing as Ugandans, we're not very good at sharing our trajectories. I think growing up, I remember you'd see people on their ascent, but you don't quite know how they got there. And I don't know if it's superstition as Ugandans, like Tobagamba Chokola kind of thing, you know, like keep it under wraps, you know, let them see you when you get there, you know, don't. Yeah. And that feeds into like how we communicate and how we share our successes and the lessons that we've learned. So it's meant to be a fireside chat with Love Sega as my headliner, and then other Ugandans doing really interesting things like Eddie Briscoe, Melissa, so a number of people who I had on my bill in October who didn't get a chance to speak. So, and networking essentially. So a space again for us to come together in the community and just hear and learn and share and progress collectively. So yeah, so coronavirus happened, and in that moment, after all the blood, sweat, I just thought, this thing is bigger than me, you know, it's bigger than you, it's bigger than everything. And I don't want to be like those Royal Ascot people. No, it was Cheltenham, because I think Cheltenham, the horse race went ahead, and then people came back from Cheltenham actually sick. You know, I didn't want those reputational issues, so it just felt right to postpone it. And I'm hoping that I definitely think I'll have a flagship event again on Independence Day, but something a little bit, some smaller events in the lead up to that. So maybe
I was actually thinking the other day about your event, and I was thinking, would there be a possibility to do it as an online thing? Because wireless got cancelled, and then now there's wireless connect. So do you consider doing something like that?
Yeah, 100%. And I think the beauty of lockdown was I was able to collaborate with the women of the 256 Collective to deliver some online events, which you were able to come to, which was wonderful. You came to mental health and like really chat, yeah. It was really good to have men there, because I often think this is a subject that men don't engage with. So thank you for coming to that chat. So, I mean, and there was a response, and I think the beauty in doing these events online is that you're not bound to your location. So we had people like dialing in from the US and Uganda. So it's much more unifying. So there's always this silver lining, you know, the silver lining behind every cloud.
Yeah, definitely. And like you mentioned, one of the chats that we had, it was a mental well-being, mental wellness, I guess, Zoom chat, and with like a therapist, a psychiatrist. I would love to.
She's her name is Priscilla Vivian, and her therapy service is called Vivify Therapy, and she calls herself a psychological, I think, well-being counselor. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'll definitely love to chat to her for this podcast as well as Love Sega, and I'm gonna have a chat. Is Eddie Driscoll is Ed Kabutusi, right? It's the same person.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to have him on the podcast as well. I would love to speak to different people in different fields. But yeah, you're absolutely right. That session was such a great session, and it was good to just listen to people being honest and open about, you know, what I guess the lockdown has been like for them, and for Priscilla to give us the few nice kind of pointers on how to improve our mental well-being during quarantine. But it was really, really good. But yeah, you're absolutely right in regards to, we're going to go way back to one of the first things you said, okay, about one of the first posts for your Elevate 256 platform. You said 10 things you wished people knew about Uganda that wasn't Idi Amin. Could you
Yes.
tell us maybe one or two of those things?
Okay, this is interesting. Okay, so one of my favorite points was, so in Uganda, in Kampala to be specific, in Chisasi, on Kikaya Hill, there's a Baha'i temple. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's this beautiful structure, and you don't even need to go to Chisasi to see it, because you just see it on the skyline. And that's one of my favorite things about Uganda, the various hills. So interestingly, the Baha'ism is a religion, and there's only one temple on every continent. And on the African continent, that temple is in Uganda.
Ooh, okay. So what is this religion? What is it?
Gosh, I'm not sure I can speak to it, but interestingly, the only reason Baha'ism even came to me was because one of my best friends, who I met in Canada, she's Iranian, and she said, "Oh, my religion is Baha'i." And I was like, "Oh, what is Baha'ism?" But it's a very, from the limited knowledge I know about it, it's very inclusive. It doesn't have hierarchy, in the sense that, you know, you don't have to be a deacon and whatnot. And I don't know, I can't speak to it much, but I think there's like a number of Ugandans in it, yeah.
Oh, okay, fair enough. And then what's the second thing?
The second thing that I highlighted was, what's the second one I can pull out? Oh yeah, that Uganda had like one of the, okay, you probably know the coffee one. I mean, we're like the 8th producer of coffee in the world. Yeah. And then I guess people probably already know that, but like, we were like voted like the most entrepreneurial nation in maybe like 2016 for having like the highest number of startups. And you see that, like, we hustle really hard. Like, you see that mentality when you're in Uganda. Yeah.
Yeah. No, like Uganda is such a, you know, the more Ugandans I speak to and the more I kind of dive into Ugandan culture and even going there by myself, I've realized just how, like you said, entrepreneurial and resourceful we are. And, you know, in regards to agriculture as well, like so many great agricultural things happen in Uganda. And I think one of the facts that I made last week was like, I think a sizable amount of our GDP comes from agriculture, you know.
Isn't it? 80 to 90?
Yeah, it's a very high percentage. I can look it up later on towards the end, or anyone who's listened to this and remembers a previous episode where I talked about it, they'll remember. But yeah, I was really interested in speaking to you because, like I said, you have a connection to people that I know already. And one of those people is a guy who, I don't know how we ended up adding each other on Facebook. I came across his music. Batabazi is what I remember his name as. But that's your little brother. And one of the things I was going to say, you're the elder sister, but your siblings look like they're older than you. Like, well, go on, because that happens to me as well.
Yeah, so I have six brothers. And the one you're talking about is Mpaji, aka Batabazi, aka PG. And yeah, he was in the mid-noughties. Can we say that? The mid-noughties. He and his friends founded like a popular music group, and they do a bit of Lugha flow and a little bit of rap. And I was living in Uganda at the time when they sort of picked up, so I'd go and support them at their shows. And I think it was a novel concept, just to have like a group from the US doing something like mixed in that way, because I think if you think about like other bands or other musical groups, they tended to be either like all girls or whatever. But it was nice to have that synergy of home and away and them embracing their culture.
Yeah, the all girls one that I remember in Uganda was Obsessions. I remember Obsessions.
Yes, Obsessions, Blue 3. Yeah.
Blue 3, yeah, Blue 3. Blue 3 did a really good song. Did Blue 3 come out of Obsessions? Like 3 members from there formed Blue 3? Maybe, I don't know.
They didn't. They came out, I think, out of a Pepsi challenge.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did a song with a really good song that I liked with Radio and Weasel. I Wanna Be Where You Are.
Yeah, I was listening to that today, like P Weasel. Oh no, Radio. Yeah. R.I.P.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of those like less ones.
I love those. I love that song. I used to listen to that a lot in uni. So, wazalibwa Uganda or wazalibwa Bulaya? Where were you born?
Well, actually, before I answer that, so I know you friended my brother on the internet, but then what's interesting is I came across you like when you did Asata Taught Me. That was yeah, and I'm a West Londoner, so I'm always looking out for like theatrical shows, and you know, there's a number of like small theaters around like West London, and I remember seeing, I don't know how it even came on my radar, maybe it was on the mailing list. I remember seeing this name, Kalungi, and this was again around me wanting to start Elevate 256, right? Like, for me, it was such an arbitrary process. I'd literally hear Ugandan name and get really excited, like, oh my gosh, this person's Ugandan, this person's Ugandan, or sometimes there might even be like Zambian because of that whole Bantu.
Yes, that happens a lot.
Times, and I've been known to be following people on Instagram.
Wait, do you drop them when you find out they're Zambian? You go, Chirunji? No, you're Zambian.
Might mute them? No, not really. I don't mute. That was my process. I'd hear names and I'd get really excited, and then I think people got tired of hearing like my excitement, and I said, I'm just gonna put this on a blog. So then your name then I came across your name, and I was like, no, like hands down, this person's Ugandan. So I started Googling, and I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. Let me go and see this play. I think I actually went by myself, and I loved it. And I remember thinking I needed to read one of the books that was referenced when I think there's a scene where the woman's talking to the young man, and she's telling him, if you want to be more eloquent, you need to study and read more. You know, you can't just use basic vocabulary. And I think she quotes like Aristotle or something. Or like,
the whole idea, I think she talks about pathos, pathos and I think ethos and logos, and I think, I could be wrong, but I think Aristotle talked about that. I know he talked about 3-act structures or the 5-act structures, but yeah. Yeah.
Then I took away a lot from it. So then and then one of my cousins, Enoch, he auditioned for it, but was unsuccessful. Yeah. And then when I was looking at Twitter a few months ago, I saw that you'd pinned that as like one of your tweets, and it was around the South Assortment. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm just making that connection now. But this is who Kalungi is.
Yeah, this is the play right here that we're talking about. I usually plug this at the end, but people can get it if you just find it. You can Google Asata Taught Me, and you can read it. It's very relevant right now with what's going on. But yeah, I appreciate that actually. I appreciate you going to see the play, man, because I love that experience. I was still in drama school when I wrote that. I was, it's my second degree, but I was in drama school, so I was in the first year. So that whole process is very kind of, it's a blur, because I was in one mindset and I was in another mindset coming together, and it was morphing, and it was a bit all over the place. But I really appreciate you going to see it, and you remembered a scene like this is like 3 years ago, and you remembered that. Like,
yeah,
that's great. That's great. Yeah, and Enoch as well. I know Enoch, and he's an incredible actor as well. Like, we obviously go out for similar things as well. So, and he's your cousin. That's mad. Like, the connections.
Yeah. And I think it was a summer of, there were a number of like plays on by other Ugandans, because this is me, like I'm really all about supporting my people, because I think Sheila Atem then had another production not too far from where yours was staged, the one about Let's Feast.
Yes, I saw that, yeah.
And then I think we bumped into the woman, I forgot her name, the mixed race woman that you...
Oh, Ajua Ando?
Yeah, we bumped into her because I think she was like closing like a performance, and then Enoch saw her and I think he started fangirling her, and it was just a cool moment in that, and having like being brought together through theatre, through Ugandan performers or stage writers. Yeah.
Your last name is Kironde or Kironde, right?
Yeah. If you pronounce it, yeah.
How do I pronounce it?
No, that's correct. But you know, like when you're out and about, you anglicize it to Kironde, but really it's Kironde.
Oh, yeah, Kironde, yeah. And I realized actually it's one of the questions. You brought this to my attention, so I can say this, even though it's going to be a question in the quiz. Okay. So Katasi.E Kironde, I think maybe it was you who, on one of your blogs, you highlighted the first Black woman to be on the front cover of a fashion magazine in the States. Is there any relation, or it's just a random, like?
Okay, so Katasi.E Kironde is my aunt. I can put that disclaimer out. Yeah. And she's very proud of that fact. And Tino, Yesenga.
Yesenga. Are you going to
She bless her, like she left Uganda really like quite early on, so her Uganda is a bit patchy, but she hears a lot.
So all this time, you know how I'm feeling right now. You know, there's a GIF on Twitter where that guy, it's from an episode of The Wire, where he realizes something and he's like, oh, that's how I'm feeling right now. Okay, wow. So that means there's also because I've been trying to do more research on you, and there's another person with exactly the same name as yours. Is that the aunt you were talking about that has the same name?
Yes, so that's the auntie with the same name, and yeah, that's my auntie with the same name. But interestingly, so when I was listening to your motivations for starting this podcast, and you mentioned the name change, or the evolution of what you wanted to call yourself, like it resonated with me because my first name is actually Eva. So I went through a similar journey, and I actually wrote about this last month as part of the Afro Bloggers challenge. I like becoming Katasi.E Kironde. Yeah, so one of the reasons I put the .e is because I need to differentiate myself from my aunt, but also depending on who I'm talking to, they'll be like, oh, hi, Eva. You know, it tells you what place and time they know me from. And then Katasi, I chose to leave my second name, but it was always a name that was used at home. And my father would never call me Eva because, you know, they came from a sort of Pan-African background and Turibaganda type of thing. So none of my you know, Mpaji centers are Gulemie, Sewan, you know, like it's African names throughout.
Oh man.
Yeah.
What tribe were you? Sorry, what clan? Sorry, clan. I know the tribe. What clan?
Nsenene.
Nsenene. Oh, grasshopper, yeah? So Nsenene Tozidia.
What did not come on? Like none.
And you know what's mad? I swear you blogged about Nsenene, like part of the food. So you can never eat. I feel sorry for you.
I feel sorry for myself too, because the way people like go on about them, you know, when people go back home, they'll say, like there's a whole process around people bringing them back alongside Matoke and Binyebo and whatever. And I'm just like sitting there thinking, I'm just gonna have to do it vicariously. And if anything, I'll just eat in Swa.
In Swa, yeah, I'm sure it tastes the same anyway. But yeah, like that's so interesting. It's so interesting speaking to you because, yeah, you have such a strong family unit, first of all, like a strong creative family. Your family's history, like to think, I'm still, obviously, there's so many things I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about the fact that you're saying that Katasi.E Kironde was the first Black woman to be on the front cover of a fashion magazine, glamour magazine. You know, I'm thinking about your talented cousin Enoch, who trained at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. I'm thinking about your brother, your younger siblings, you know, Mpaji Batabazi, who actually, back when I was in uni and I was looking for Luga Flow rappers, these are people that I was coming across, you know, GNL, Zamba, and that kind of stuff. So I'm thinking about, you know, your connection with Uganda. You're rooted in Uganda proper. But what I really want to speak to you about is something that I guess we have in common, was to do with your name change. Yeah. And, you know, people who've been listening to this first few episodes, if you haven't, just check out one of the first episodes. I talk about, I used to go by Isaac. That was the name that I went by. But I was born in Uganda, and in Uganda, actually, my name was Kalungi Isaac. Because on my name in Uganda, at least back in the days, maybe it still happens now, your Ugandan name sometimes is the first name that comes first. It's a bit like in China, actually. They do their last name first. So their surname is the thing that comes first, and then their name is the second thing. So I remember in Uganda, I was Kalungi Isaac. And I remember people from my dad's side of the family used to call me Kalungi.
Right.
And people on my mom's side of the family, my aunt, she used to call me Isaac, and that was the name. So I always had it in my mind that maybe my mom picked Isaac as the name. And then when I came to England, you know, Isaac was a lot easier for people to, I guess, for people to pronounce, and, you know, it was just easier. It just went, yeah, Isaac, let's give him Isaac. And then came a period in my time where I was like, actually, that name doesn't really fit who I feel is the real authentic me. And I just dropped it. And I remember, you know, when I first did that, my mom, you know, I'm sure was not happy about it. And my siblings, it took them a little while for them to get used to it and calling me Isaac by accident. I'm not gonna lie, you know, I did despise being called Isaac, even though I respect that my mom called me that. Yeah. I've reached a time where I despised hearing it. And when I hear it now, I hear a different person. It's a different person. And you said, you know, when people call you Eva, you kind of think, oh, they know me from that time. And when I hear anyone call me Isaac, I go, okay, I know where you know me from, or when you know me. And B, I also know how you assume you know me as well, because there comes assumptions like, oh yeah, you know, like, it's very childlike the way sometimes people respond to me as Isaac. And did you have a similar thing? Do you have a similar thing with that? Like, what was your reason for going, Katasi.E Kironde?
Well, at the time, so I have so many names, and I guess my mother would use them interchangeably. And I'd always know that I was in trouble if she called me Nanskombi, like Nanskombi Gwe, you know, like.
That's the to it. You're in trouble.
To it, right? You know, but then I guess the real moment was when I moved to Canada for a little while, years ago. I was finishing off high school, and I was living in a very white and very homogenous town. And I was kind of forced to get into more Black thought and like Black literature as a means of surviving, I think, because of what was around me and the amount of racism and ignorance that I wasn't accustomed to, having like lived in London and the various other places I had. And I think one of the most key books at the time was Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. Like it was so powerful, the themes in there. And then I started listening to like Dead Prez, Let's Get Free. So I was at the height, exactly. I was at the height, exactly. At the height of like my Black consciousness. And I think it's an interesting thing because if you've been born in Uganda and raised in Uganda, like a lot of these thoughts don't cross your mind because you're living in a place where everyone looks like you, where your leaders look like you. You're not a minority, so you're not fazed by identity issues. But I think it's a very different experience for us in the diaspora. So I remember just thinking, I don't want to lead with this name either. I want something that's like, I want everyone, if it's at home or outside, to call me Katasi. And like everyone was very supportive of it. I remember one school friend was like, I'm just going to call you Eva. I'm not calling you that, you know.
Yeah. People like that, I hate them.
Exactly. They're just like, why are you being so difficult? And then along the way, I remember I did a stint in Uganda. I worked in Uganda for a bit. And, you know, this colonial mentality is there. Like, there's a lot of decolonization work to do. Even if, like, I'll contradict myself and say, you may not have identity issues in Uganda, but the colonial mentality will still impact you or still reflected. So I had this, and I say that because I think there's less room for questioning, like, who am I or whatever, you know, things are just what they are. So she says to me, oh, what's your name? So I tell her my name's Katasi. She says, I'm not very comfortable calling you that. Have you not got like a Christian name that I can call you by?
Ooh, and is this like a Ugandan person?
This is a Ugandan person. This is someone I work with. And I was just like, no, that's what you're getting, you know? Or, you know, people say, like, yeah, Nanskombi, like, let's roll with that. You know what I mean? You know, because they're all like bent on having these first and Christian names. But then I think in my journey, realizing that sometimes my name sounds too African and it works against me. Because, you know, we know that in application forms where they're not anonymized, if your name sounds too Af or too complicated, you know, some racist recruiter or a recruiter of unconscious bias would be like, oh, no, that's too hard. I'm not going to say that. You know, I'm not going to go forward. So I remember adjusting my name and just thinking, I wonder if I change my name back to Eva and then translate my surname, which is Kironde, which means to pick something up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, I wonder what will happen. So same CV as Katasi Kironde. I put it out as Eva Pick. I'm telling you, the phone was off the hook. Like, people were calling me. Yeah. It was so frustrating.
I'm thinking of doing that. I'm thinking of doing that as well, you know. Sorry to cut your story short, but
yeah. I mean, and it's true because, and I think it's important to test out these theories on yourself because, you know, people would just be quite dismissive. Nah, don't worry, what's in a name? It's just a name or whatever, or like, but racism is real and discrimination happens right at the beginning of these processes where your name doesn't sound appeasing enough to someone. But then in some circles, you know, my name stands out. And I heard you saying that on your pod around the power in that. So, I mean, I could go on about names and I have so much to say about names, especially the naming processes around how like we've lost our traditions as Baganda in the sense that everyone, so I'm always calling my brothers out about this. You know, they all use Kironde and traditionally you'd have your own name. So if your name was like, you know?
I'm sorry, I have to stop. Did I say this in the podcast? I thought I was the only person that needed
that far, but these are my own thoughts. So I'm always gunning people.
Like, no, that is exactly what I always told people. That's why, you know, a few seconds ago I was saying in Uganda, Kalungi Isaac, yeah, it's true. It's absolutely true. Yeah, you always had your own last name, and even so much so that actually I've got my uncles are not called Seba and the K. You know, I have uncles who have different names. That's their names, and it's so funny because we only put, like, for example, my mum and dad are not married, but yet, you know, we're all Seba and the K, as in with the exception of my mum, but like all the kids are Seba and the K, and I go, actually, it will make more sense if, Moses Yempoza, Beka Kajimu. So, because that was our tradition, you carry your own name, and it actually is helpful because you stand on your own 2 feet, and you're not held. You don't try to ride on your dad's last name. Nowadays, you got big families in Uganda. They're riding on that one name, and you ain't done nothing to earn that. You gotta make your name strong. That's what I used to remember, because Jajawange, Kayanja, but we can't all be called Kayanja because that was his name. He gave them all individual names. He happened to give one of his kids that name, but even then he probably has his own name, but he just happened to give him that because sometimes you might give yourself, okay, junior one, okay, so you know what I mean. So no, but go on, continue with that. That's such a good point.
And it's so good to hear someone else like appreciate it, because I think my siblings are like, so they can now we can still make our own legacies with Kironde. Because they all obviously they're men and they take their names forward. So when you hear like all their wives have the surname, and it's like you could recycle the same wedding decorations
Yes,
the Kirondes or whatever. It's just like make your own legacy. Anyway, I think there's something in going back to how we were and just remembering what our traditions were.
No, you're so right with that. And I stopped kind of like saying that analogy, or at least the anecdote, because I just thought it's been lost in tradition. I felt like I was taking crazy pills, because I used to always tell, that was the story. I was like, listen, I don't have a whole line of Sebande K's, like my great granddad is Sebande K. No, that's my dad's name. That's who my Jaja Wangom Kazi, I'm sure every now and then she would call him Sebande K, whatever. And then you have the brothers Sechito and so on and so forth. And that's what you knew their name. That's how you knew them by their last name. But nowadays they group everyone together, and we all get lost in this, I guess you're right, like this colonial way, colonial traditions, which is we're all a family, so let's all have the same last family name, and which means that there's no distinguishing yourself from your brother and sister. And back in the days, although again I'm not an expert in Uganda history, but although you come together as a family, you did have your own unique identity, and you were encouraged to have your own unique identity. And I think we're losing that. In this kind of like, I guess, desire to be assimilate as part of the West, and and I understand why my mum and dad did that, because actually when they first came here, and my siblings, before we formalized everything, the passports, they all did have their individual last names actually. So in school, it must have confused the teachers. It must have made them think that my mum had all these different husbands, because they all had individual last names. So, but I always found it interesting. Okay, wow, that's really giving me food for thought. Really giving me food for thought. Okay, so are you based in London now, fully?
Yeah, I'm based in London. London is my base. Yeah.
Okay.
I try to go back to Uganda as often as possible.
Okay. Well, I've got a provocative question, right?
Okay.
And I was talking about it in a different podcast episode, but why not move to Uganda fully, permanently? You love Uganda so much.
Okay. I've done that before. I've lived in Uganda. I spent like 6 years in UG in my adulthood. But I think the lessons I took away from that experience led me to think that you need to do a lot of foreplanning before. You need to plan a lot before you go there. So, I mean, I fantasize about living in Uganda and I miss it in its various ways, but for the life that I want, I think it's a hard place to live. It's a real hustle. Unfortunately, I think like there's no security net. If you don't make it, you fall through the cracks and that's it. Whereas, of course, there's the comforts that come with living in England. But yeah, I'd love to, but it's just really that. I think it's a hard place to live, and I'm not prepared to like work that hard right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? To be honest with you, I think most of us are probably in the same boat. Most of us feel exactly the same way, you know. I mean, for me, the safety net, even though the UK has that safety net, I kind of feel the other things, the other fuckeries. I don't know, like if I could wake up and I had a sizable amount of money in my account, I would leave and move to Uganda, despite it not having that safety net. Because even though the UK has that, the benefit system has loads of opportunities that you can find ways to you can eat. It's very hard to starve in the UK.
Yeah.
Even though it has that, I feel like that gives it license to treat people like you and me, you know, in a very disrespectful way, you know, like whether it be the racism, whether it be, you know, the kind of wage disparity, you know, because you end up thinking, okay, I'm only earning whatever, 10, 15,000 pounds a year. But hey, at least in Uganda, you'd be earning less. So why don't you appreciate that, you know? Or you end up thinking, oh, I'm in this 1-bedroom flat and it's leaking. But at least, well, in Uganda, you might not even have a toilet, or you might not have all this stuff. Because, yeah, I guess the point I'm making is, although it has its good bits, the bad bits can sometimes drive you crazy. And whereas in Uganda, the little time I've spent there, and you can maybe let me know if you disagree with this, the little time I spent there, I found that your standard of life, your standard of living can be a lot better because you're around, like you said before, people that look like you, so mentally that changes, especially if that changes the way you view yourself, especially if you're coming from Europe. The money that you have here in the UK lasts longer in Uganda, stretches a bit further. So you can find yourself actually living a better standard of life in Uganda if you're coming from the UK.
Yeah, I believe that, and I know what you're saying. There's a complacency that comes with knowing that there's a social net, but I think the people that I've seen do it successfully have sort of been very intentional and have had strong investment here that can sort of sustain them back home. And you know, you can have a better quality of life, but I just think to be able, so when I lived in Kampala, the things I missed the most when I was there, I missed traveling and being able to just like jump on an airplane to go to see like people to go to a neighboring country, you know, in the way that we had that privilege here, like you just went to Amsterdam, you know. And I remember thinking, because I went quite early on, I remember thinking the novelty of that hustle and bustle and that sustaining that wore off, because you need energy for that, because it's got this, it's unpredictable, right? So there's something that wears on you. But I think if you're very sort of intentional, you have a plan, things can work for you. And also just, I think, appreciating that it's quite nepotistic. It's very much who you know. And I found, because it's such a small society, or in terms of like the elites, right? Or those classes, you end up going to secondary school and primary school, the same people you went to university with. And I think if you're not part of that network, it's a very networked society. It's easy to just fall on the fringes and feel a little bit isolated. But of course, there's ways around it. And honestly, like, I'd love to live there, but it just takes a lot of planning.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. But like what you just described in regards to the nepotism that exists in, I guess, the industries, whatever, in Uganda, you just described the UK. Like,
I know, and it's true. And I think it's because I don't know if this is your experience, but of course, when you go to Uganda, for me anyway, I can speak for myself. When I go to Uganda, my social standing changes dramatically. Do you know what I mean? You know, you're not just a black person on the street. You know, you've got clout. You know, you can make a phone call to some minister because the minister's probably your uncle. You know, things like that. But yeah, but nepotism. Yeah, it's yeah.
But that's what I'm saying though. That's why I feel like the quality of life and the standard of life, if you're coming from the UK and go to Uganda, is a lot better, because you're right, you do, and sometimes it is a sense of clout or credibility that's been projected onto you simply because you came from the UK, and also it's something that enters you naturally because again you have that sense of like, hey, like, and it's really painful, or rude to say, but it's actually, there is a tiny bit sense of superiority with people that come from outside of, who come from Europe or you know, the Americas, whatever, into Uganda, because it's like, say, the UK, you know, whatever. So there is that, it's coming from both sides, from external and internal as well, and that actually ends up affecting you positively because you think anything is possible, which is exactly what the bazungu bano ababera wano abalenga ba Boris Johnson abo abasomera Eton, Harrow, no, that's the kind of the mentality they have because it's been ingrained in them. The only difference with us is it's something that it's almost thrown onto you, like you land at Entebbe and all of a sudden people can, hey, go on, they can't come, they'll drive you. All of a sudden your money your money travels or is important, your opinion is important. People want you to enter certain places because you've got that degree. And I feel like you can use that power for good. Of course, there are people that also use it for bad. And the way you can use it for good is if you somehow maybe use your expertise and your know-how and move in a particular industry and use it within that industry, and help kind of improve that particular workspace that you're working in. The example I'll give is, for example, you know, my mum's a nurse and she's got about 5 to 10 years until she retires. And I always imagine, what if she was to retire early, go to Uganda, and simply because she's been part of the NHS for 15 plus years, she's got a degree here, simply because of that, she will be able to obviously advance into the I guess, I don't know, health sector in Uganda and help it advance in itself because she's bringing that expertise and that know-how. She's pretty much doing what the Bazungu do when they come here and say, oh yeah, like I spent 3 years in uni, let me go, you know, start a health center, because they do that. But it's just, we shouldn't, I don't know, like, I guess the point I'm making is, it's not necessarily a bad thing that that you bring that kind of sense of worth, because that's what's been lacking while you're living in Uganda, in the UK, because you haven't been valued. Whereas when you go to Uganda, you are valued.
Yes, I think that's true. And I think it's something you can still carry with you here, you know, reminding yourself like, this is a choice. I'm here by choice and I know what my legacy is. I know who my ancestors are. I know, because hence why I have issues with this like Black British identity, because I don't think it can always serve us. It takes away from my experience as a Ugandan person. But yeah, I think you can still carry that confidence of you knowing where you come from and the options you have and navigating both worlds. So I think that's the ideal, like still having connection to Uganda and still having that connection here. But I think what essentially I always grapple with is tribalism. Would you either pick tribalism or racism if you had to pick the two? Because that's another factor, you know, in Uganda, tribalism is real. So it limits you from certain things. And I've always wondered, like, would I rather live in a society that's tribalistic or deal with racism?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I was going to say that I guess you can still carry that sense of value, self-value and high self-esteem in the UK. The only problem is, you know, you get shot down very easily in the UK for doing that, you know, both literally and physically. Maybe, you know, not to a great, sorry, literally and kind of metaphorically, but maybe not to the same extent as maybe as it happens in the US. But whereas in Uganda, again, you can kind of like, let me know if I'm talking nonsense here. Whereas in Uganda, if you do have that self-esteem and that high self-value, sometimes actually that carries you, and it can be encouraged sometimes, you know. You can be encouraged to think you're the big man on campus, and you can travel far, you can go far in that. People are going to say, hey, you think you're older? Okay, shut up, whatever. Whereas here, and because of racism, the minute a black person gets above their station, they get, you know, pulled down a peg or two. Did you find it's a similar thing there? You know, maybe the tribalism element kind of contributes to that. Did you find that happens?
I think Ugandan society is very much about like anyakuzadde, like abazadde bo like bebani, and anyakumanyi, like who knows you, who are you, and you can have as many degrees from Cambridge as you want, but that doesn't, if you don't know the right people, then it's very useless.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's disappointing to hear that. You have to be so well connected, and that takes work. And I'm just, yeah. But I mean, again, we could say that's the same thing as here.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I think I'm coming from a place of privilege, a little bit like, you know, I guess a few racism deniers, just because they're doing well, they go, well, there is no racism, you know, both black and white. You know, you have a few black conservatives who might, you know, kind of deny a few experiences and say, no, it's not that, but simply because they're coming from a place of privilege. And I am those people in Uganda who do have connections through families and stuff like that. So I do know that anytime I've gone to Uganda, I've been riding on a good privileged wave. So I've never been in that position my whole life, basically, my whole life. It's always been a place of privilege. So I can't really, I guess, speak from the perspective of someone who's coming there fresh. They've got no connections. They come from the UK. They don't know who to call. They don't have their, you know, member of their family who's connected to the parliament, to the government. So I can see why someone would kind of struggle to be able to do well in Uganda coming from the UK or outside of Uganda. Yeah. But I've really enjoyed speaking to you, you know, really enjoyed speaking to you, so much so that I think I forgot to let people know that this episode of the ProapUgandan podcast is sponsored by KALUNGEM. I think Katasi is aware of this. KALUNGEM is a clothing line that I've started. And I really, to be honest with you, I started it because I wanted to, you know, complement my podcast and my music with some merchandise. But actually, I just wanted to also create a luxury, you know, eventually I wanted to be a luxury clothing brand that Africans can be proud of, and we don't always have to go for the other brands and that are not African focused, you know. So I wanted to create something like that you can be proud of. And so KALUNGEM, you can find us on Instagram at KALUNGEM, KALUNGM clothing, and you can find us on Twitter at KALUNGEM_. And or just search kalungi.co.uk and you click the link that has KALUNGEM on the website. So this is the end of the podcast where most people get nervous because it's like the quiz. So
I'm ready.
You're ready. You know what? You're going to do well in this. I've decided to reuse a quiz because the last guest, even though she tried her best, she didn't get any of them right.
Oh, no. Okay, fine.
You're going to get at least one right because, you know, it's to do with your aunt. So you'll be able to get that one right. So, so let's get these questions up.
Okay.
Okay, the proper Ugandan quiz with Katasi.E Kironde, aka Eva Pick. Okay, question 1. What is the name of the famed Archbishop of York? What is the name of the famous Archbishop of York?
Sentamu.
Correct! Boo! Woo! I knew you'd get that. Okay, question 2. What part of Uganda do you find the Basoga people? Is it east? Okay, you got it right. I thought I was going to have to give you... Okay, wow! Ooh, you're the most confident person I've had in this. Okay, so question 3. Oh, you're going to know this. George the poet is a Ugandan British poet. But what is his last name?
Mpanga.
Oh my God, God damn it. Okay, this one is obvious, but in case someone's watching this for the first time. Okay, so Katasi.E Kironde made history in August of 1968. What did she do?
She was the face. She was the first Black woman to be on a fashion magazine in America.
Bagging, good. And the magazine was Glamour magazine.
Right.
Okay, all right. So this is the one where, I don't know, you might get this one. You might get this one. Okay. What year did Uganda first receive the first set of missionaries? What year did Uganda first receive the first set of missionaries?
Was it 1839?
You were so close. You were so close.
Okay.
It was 1877.
Do you know what? I was going to say 1870 something because the fun fact I wanted to share is from 1878. But I was like, no, they must have been doing stuff before that. Okay, fine. Okay. 1877. I'm going to keep that in my mind. Thank you.
Yeah, 1877. And I read it from a journal. There was a journal that was talking about, you know, the Uganda kings and so on and so forth. And I think, I could be wrong, but I think the first king that received the missionaries was Mwanga.
Okay.
Yes, in 1877. Again, if anyone's listening to this and going, "You're lying, man," put the true date in the comments, and we can argue. Okay, do you want to give us the fact of the week?
Well, the fact of the week is only a year out from this previous fact that you mentioned. So my fact of the week is that in 1878, the cesarean sections were being performed in Bunyoro, and women would be sedated with banana wine, and these Ugandans were basically doing these procedures with quite rudimentary equipment like hot iron rods, but they were successful, and like women were able to like have the C-sections, get patched up, and continue on their lives. So, and this was found by some European religious missionary, or like medical missionary, and it was very novel because they weren't doing that at the time in the West. So that's my fun fact.
I love that fact. I love that fact. Ever since I found out about it, I put it in a play. And I just love how it shows that we were clearly civilized, and there was no need to try to civilize us.
Exactly.
You know, so I just love that fact, and I'm so glad you said it, because yeah, more people need to know that we've taught the West so many things, and we're ahead of the time. And I think to add to that, I think they found that the reason why they were performing the successful cesareans is because they were actually cleaning the instruments with some sort of, homemade alcoholic, substance to be able to make it clean. Whereas they were just getting random, back in the West, they were getting random instruments and cutting without even cleaning, So yeah, sorry to use that movement. But yeah, okay. Do you have a word of the day?
So my word of the day, I struggled with this, but then I had a fun story around it. So my word of the day is Eduardo.
Ooh, it's linking with your fact of the week. Ooh, Kironde, you're picking the right things. Back to Mamulunji. Yo, yes.
I didn't even make that connection. It's just so natural to me.
I love the confidence.
And like to take it back to my brothers, when I was in Uganda one summer, or maybe I was at school, I can't remember. We went on a road trip to Namutamba to see one of our uncles, and I kept on seeing this sign everywhere. And I was like, what is this? Why do I keep seeing this everywhere? And I just stopped and I asked them, and I said to my brothers, what is Edwaliro? Like I keep seeing and they were like, no, now it's Edwaliro.
Yeah.
And I was just reading it in my English mind, because when I'm reading Luganda, I had to say it several times to say it in the Chiganda way. So Edwaliro.
Edwaliro, and it means
hospital.
Hospital. Brilliant. Wow, thank you so much, Katasi.E Kironde. Thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time out to listen to me speaking, to you also giving us your stories and your perspective as a Ugandan, and let people know how they can find your Elevate 256 and how they can find you online.
Oh, thank you. So Elevate 256 is literally www.elevate256.com. It's an independent website. We're not just on Instagram. On Instagram, we are at Elevate256 and Twitter at ElevateUG. And you can find me on those platforms. And I'm releasing a podcast I think next week. It's a food podcast. It's called Unsavory Ethnic Types. So look out for that too. Or amplifying Ugandan culture with some other people who are doing their bit. So Unsavory Ethnic Types, about food, culture, and London life. So
brilliant. Okay, good. All right. Well, thank you. This has been an incredible podcast. And I just want to remind people that my debut album, Katugende, is available right now on all streaming sites. Just simply search Kalungi Fresh on YouTube Music, Apple Music, Spotify, Bandcamp, anywhere, or you can just find it on YouTube. There's a playlist right there. So thank you so much, Katasi. And yeah, we'll continue to speak, later on. My battery on my laptop is dying, but
thank you so much for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, and my pleasure as well, and thank you. And let me know if you want me to come on your Unsavory Ethnic Types.
Sure.
I would love to come and we can speak about food, Ugandan food, in Media, Uganda. So
thank you so much, Kalungi.
have a good day, yeah?
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.